In Excel, being presented with a very huge data like what we are seeing right now can be very daunting to view. There are times that you would actually want some parts of the data to stay, especially with the headers. You would want to see the headers as you go along so you don't miss track of what information you are actually viewing. In our data here, we have a list of movie directors. There are studios they work with and release dates of their most recent videos. One problem with this data set is that as we scroll down, the header also scrolls up, fast disappearing. But we wouldn't want it that way. We would want the headers to stay so that we can actually know what information we are dealing with in each column. That is where pane freezing comes in. Excel provides a nice way for you to either lock some of the rows or some of the columns so that as you scroll along in a huge data set, you will still be able to see what you are actually dealing with or the type of information you are actually dealing with. To access pane freezing, you come to the View tab. On the View tab, you click on Freeze Panes. Now, there are three options here for you to work with. I will first start with the second option and then the last option. Now, the second option says Freeze Stop Row. Freeze Stop Row will freeze, in our case, it will freeze the headers of our dataset. So now let's click it and see. Once we click on it, our headers has been frozen. The row containing our headers has been frozen. So in this way, as we scroll downwards, the headers still remain as the data moves. So in that way, by scrolling down, you still get to see what type of information you are dealing with in which column. In the same way, we can ask Excel to freeze the first column like this. So by freezing the first column, mind you, by freezing the first column, in this case, we have actually removed the freezing of the first row. So by freezing the first column, when we move our seek bar to the right, you realize that column A is not moving, but all other columns are moving. Column A is not moving, but all other columns are moving. So one might ask, what happens in the case that I want both row 1 and column A to stay? In that case, we use the first option, which is freeze panes. But because we already have some frozen panes, it now reads on freeze panes. Let's do that first, and then let's go back and use freeze panes. But before you use freeze panes, you need to select the cell, which is going to be the intersection of where you want to freeze. In our case, we want to freeze the first row and then the first column. You want to freeze the first row and then the first column. So in order for you to freeze the first row and the first column, you need to select cell B2. Cell B2. Cell B2 now serves as the intersection. That is the point at which we want the data to move. The point at which we want the data to move. So we select cell B2, come back to freeze panes, and then click freeze panes. By doing that, as we move our seek bar to the right, you realize that the ID is not moving, which is column A is not moving. Likewise, if we move downwards, we realize that the headers is also not moving, which is row 1 is also not moving. In case you want to do this by probably wanting to lock the first two columns, let's come back on freeze panes and then select cell C2. Because we want to freeze column A and column B, we select cell C2. By selecting cell C2 and then coming to freeze panes, you realize that as we move to the right, director and ID stays, which is column B and column A stays. When we move downwards, we realize that all the headers are also staying. All the headers are also staying. So you can have the flexibility of actually moving through and then seeing that, right, Steven, all the records passing by are for Steven Spielberg. And for Steven Spielberg, as we move to the right, you realize that everything stays, the name of the director stays in place, and then the ID stays in place. That way we are able to see all the records and link it directly to Steven Spielberg without necessarily coming back and forth. So if you want some columns or some rows to stay in a large data set as you scroll left to right or top and down, this is the best approach to use. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more educational content on Microsoft Excel.